Hi, my name is Daniel McKinley, and today we are going to be taking a look at the 2 to 4 player game Crusaders by Tasty Minstrel Games, designed by Seth Jaffe. So to set up the game Crusaders, each player will pick a color and set their board up like this. They'll take the 6 tiles, one player will mix up those tiles and announce the order of how they're laid out to all the other players. All other players will take their tiles here and place them in the same order. You'll then put 2 of these action tokens on each one, place all the buildings in their appropriate spot, and place these tokens right here, the mustard tokens. Then on the board itself, you'll start on one of the spots that show your knight in reverse turn order. So after you've chosen a first player, in reverse turn order, you'll choose which spot you'll be. Also, make sure your board is on the right side. This side has for 2 players, which I haven't set up right now. The other side has 3 and 4 players. Also, I don't have all of them out right now, but notice how there are bonus tiles around the board. You'll want to place one for each spot that shows available, as well as you want to put one of these army tokens on each spot that has a flag as well. Once the board is filled and everybody's placed their tokens down, you can begin. Now, the way you play on your turn is very simple. Your goal is to try and get the most victory points. The victory points are represented by these tokens here. You're going to be taking a certain number of victory points for each action you do, depending on the action. Also, at the beginning of setup, you'll set aside a certain number of these victory points based on the number of players. This will also act as the timer of the game. Once the pile of the supplied tokens have been depleted, then that triggers the end of the game. So let's look at the player's board and how you're going to be doing actions on your turn. That is made up of these 6 little tiles here. These triangular tiles have one of 5 symbols on it. They have either build, crusade, travel, there's a second travel, muster, or influence. On your turn, you're either going to use one of these wedges, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment, or you're going to flip one of them over. That is considered upgrading. To do an action, let's say I wanted to travel, that would be moving my piece. You take the number of tokens in either of them that show travel, and you distribute them in a clockwise order, like so. That means I took the action for travel twice. I can move my piece 2 spaces. Unless there is an army there, then in order to leave that, it takes 2 action points. So to move from here to an outside one, or this army to any other army spot, that will take 2 action points. You can continue moving as long as you have the action points available. Later on in the game, you'll get multiple knights. You can move them however you'd like as well. In this previous example, I can move 1 action here, and then 1 however I'd like as well. So that's the first example. You'll be using this to move around the board quite often. However, there'll be times where you want to defeat the certain armies. In this previous example right here, I want to fight him. If I look over here on the right side, the orange tiles, they have a strength of 3. That's also not only how many actions you need to take to defeat them, but that's also how many victory points you'll get by doing so. So in order to take that action, if I am on a spot, I have to have at least 3 tokens there. I pick up all 3 and distribute them clockwise like how I did earlier, and that is crusading. I defeat this, keep this at the end for a majority. I would receive 3 victory points for doing so, and they now become stronger for the next players. So that is the crusade action. There's also a silver army right here as well that you would want to defeat. But there's also brown armies. And this is defeated in a little bit of a different way. You'll notice that there is no track for them here. And that's because they always have a strength of 6. So you have to do that action with 6 tokens on it, or with bonuses, as I'll show you later. But you get a benefit when you do so. You still get the 6 points, but then you also get to build the appropriate building type. In this, I would build a barn, or this, I would build a municipal building. And that leads us to our build action. When you take a build action, you would need to build for at least the cost that shows on the board. Most of them start at 3, then 4, 5, and then 6 strength, except for the municipal buildings, which is 3, 5, 7, and 9. The number of hexes that it shows there is how many actions you need to take for that. So in this example, if I want to build any of those buildings, after I've cleared the army, or if I'm in an empty spot, I do the action for 3 times, and then I build the appropriate building in the square. There can only be 1 building per hex as well, but there could be any number of players interacting with that spot. Also, just because you defeated the army there does not mean that you have to build the building. Any player could do so if it's available. Next action is influence. This is probably the simplest action of them all. For the number of tokens you move off of it, like this example, 2, that's how many influence tokens you get. They're straight victory points, but there are very few bonuses for that. And lastly, there is muster. You have 5 tokens on the top of your board that will let you muster. The first one, which is level 1, takes 3 actions, then you flip it to the side. You'll notice this has a crusade symbol. That's on purpose, because anytime you now do the crusade action, you'll get an additional action point. So in my previous example, if I'm now here on the gold spot with the gold army, and I did the crusade action after having mustered, then I take my normal 2 action points plus the 1 here, and that defeats it. That gives me a total of 3. Which also, I would like to point out that this, when we built that municipal building, that gave you another build option. And under all of these, you get extra bonus icons for any time you do certain actions. In this example, anytime I do a travel option or the muster option, then that adds 1 more point to my mustering. As you'll notice, they extend higher and higher. So you're going to be building this engine as you're continuing throughout it. But let's talk about these bonus tiles. They're fairly self-explanatory. Tiles like this that show an influence point, that means if you build either of these types of buildings in that spot, you would gain the appropriate points. So I would get a bonus point for building this here. Also, anytime you build the buildings, the flag that shows here what level they're on is also how many influence points you get as well. There's also ones like this that show a -1 hex. That means that building either of those types takes 1 less action token to do so. Now finally, let's talk about upgrading. If you upgrade, you take one of your tiles, one of your wedges, and flip it to the bonus side, like this. Then you redistribute the tokens on any one of the tiles. So if it was set up like this and I just upgraded that tile, I could take this one and distribute those tiles accordingly. Then on a future turn, if I take this action, I can move the tokens like normal. Then I have that number of action points, in this case 4, to use for either of the actions, or a combination of them. I could build for 2 and crusade for 2 in this example, plus any bonuses I receive. As I said earlier, once all of the tokens from the supply have been depleted, players will take the same number of turns, and the player with the most victory points is the winner. The last thing I wanted to show you before the end here is that during setup, you'll be dealt 2 of these Crusaders tiles. These are extra little bonuses that you'll take at the beginning of the game, and they each have their own little abilities for how they work. In this example, you would start with still 12 hexes, where this one you would start with 11, but they each give you a different benefit throughout the game. I'll let you to discover all of those on your own, but that should give you a good overview on how to play Crusaders. So that's how you play Crusaders. It's a really simple game. It looks way more complicated than it is, but it has wonderful room for planning strategy, long-term goal, and you finish it in like 30 to 60 minutes. It's really quick. It's worth a shot of trying. So if you would like to see it, try it live, or if you'd like to try it yourself, come by Zia Comics in Las Cruces, New Mexico, where you can try Crusaders.
Get nerdy with me. Tell me what game that you get on. Is it card or read? What kind of class do you play, girl? In an RPG?